We got to meet the cadets. I was expecting them to be intimidating.
Yeah.
They were really down to earth. They came from all walks of life, something I had not encountered at that point.
How was the transition into then active duty Army? And out of curiosity, did you at any point thinking like, maybe I can go pro with this baseball thing? Or was it a thing that you said like, I knew I'm going to play this through college and then like, that's the extent of it?
I felt like he gave me an immediate dose of self-awareness that I needed maybe.
To your point of the 10 or 12 years and then getting out, that was like a kind of a common theme on the show as well of not that it's a point of no return, but it does become, I think, a little bit more difficult if you're like, well, I'm already halfway there to retirement. Like, do I this? Kind of. Welcome to the In the Field podcast, where we speak to veterans, service members, and those in the transition process to learn about their stories. Darin, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Thanks so much for coming in. I know Amtrak in not quite snowy weather, but wet, cold weather is not super fun. You're coming in from Boston, that's correct?
Boston, that's right. Right out of Cambridge, yep.
How long have you been in Boston for?
I've grown up in just outside of Boston, so that's where I'm originally from. Fellow 508 area code
Central
there.
Mass.
Southeastern Mass for me.
Yeah.
So, but after being in the Army and going to get my MBA up in New Hampshire, I settled back on the South Shore. Okay. So I've been back home since 2006.
Awesome.
So yeah.
Well, we'll try not to talk about the Pats and the Red Sox too much on the podcast.
The Red Sox are looking good.
Yeah.
Looking good.
Well, first question I ask all my guests, even though I did just ask you a question, is when was the last time you had an MRE, and which MRE would you like to try today?
2003.
Okay.
And anything but pizza.
Okay.
So a tortellini always agrees, but we'll see.
Let's see. So we've got beef ravioli. We do have pizza.
Yeah.
What else do we have? I think we have a lot of stews.
I think the
pork sausage.
I think the beef ravioli is the move.
All right. We'll stick with that. It's funny. I think I've now have had every single MRE in both box A and B.
Yeah.
But I always forget which ones have which side, so we'll
I figured you'd have it mapped out.
I we could get other MREs on the podcast, but then we'd be eating MREs from like 2016 and 2015 and getting one from 2003 is just probably not advised.
No, they're not that shelf stable.
No,
they open pretty easily.
Yeah. Well, they've made some significant improvements, I will say, to these. So
18.
Darin, I mean, I would love to start off with just learning more about your background. So
sure.
How was it growing up, especially in Massachusetts? And then when did you start thinking about joining the military?
Yeah. So, so like I said, I grew up southeastern Mass, a town called Bridgewater, which is pretty, I would say, middle class to working class type town. And I went to the public schools there. My dad was enlisted Marines, so he grew up in a city, Fall River, which is a little further south. I think he did that because his opportunity set wasn't as broad, so it was sort of enlist in the Marines or figure something else out. So it turned out my brother actually ended up enlisting in the Marine Corps as well. So I did come from a military family.
Was your brother older?
He's 3 grades older, so about 2.5 years older. Yep. So
was that did he go enlisted?
He went enlisted as well. He tried out a semester of local college and decided that he was going to take my dad's path, and so So
growing up in Massachusetts, there's a few options. There's like UMass Amherst, Lowell,
Bridgewater State.
Bridgewater State.
That's
right.
There we go. That's the in-town school. Which is now a big university, I guess. So
So was that the influence in your life? And then did you think about going the enlisted route, officer route? What's going through your mind as you prepare to graduate high school?
Yeah. So I'm a child of the 80s and 90s, and so I wanted to be a fighter pilot.
Yeah.
And
Top Gun.
The big thing for me was the Thunderbirds. We'd go to all the air shows, and there were a ton of them back then. All sorts of different aircraft between the Navy, Air National Guard, Air Force. You'd see them overhead. That was a thing way back then. And so I wrote a letter to the Air Force Academy at age 11, pre-internet.
Yeah.
They sent
No
me
chat
back.
GPT.
No GPT. They sent me back a very nice, beautiful admissions catalog. It was about this thick.
Yeah.
I read it all. I was excited. They told me they had a file on me and that they were going to, kind of pay attention to me. So every year I'd get a catalog from the Air Force Academy.
Yeah.
So I was pretty high
That's
on
cool.
that. And I wanted to, fly for the Thunderbirds, fly the F-16. So that was my goal for a while growing up, probably till I got to high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
What then changed? I mean, was there a cooler movie that came out than Top Gun? Or, I mean, I feel like the Air Force must have been like, was it Air Force or Navy?
Air Force.
Air
The
Force.
Air Force
So they were
Academy with the beautiful chapel. I wanted to go out to Colorado Springs and
they must have thought they had you on lock.
well, as you get older, different priorities take hold, and I was really into baseball. And so I was playing through, middle school, junior high, high school, and I was good enough to be noticed by colleges. And so I wanted to play at a big time college program.
Yeah.
So guess what program? I had a little tiny poster on my wall.
Yeah.
My dream school. If you think of the ultimate academic and baseball program, what comes to mind?
Ooh, putting me on the spot here. So I'm not a big baseball guy, especially not college baseball.
I'm
Is it a
asking
school?
I'm asking you for a reason. Stanford. It was
Okay.
Stanford,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was.
So Stanford was my holy grail, and that was probably as aspirational as you could get.
Yeah.
So I had that for a goal for a while, and then I think the kind of world started to meld back together.
Yeah.
And my brother's best friend was a huge role model of mine. He went off to West Point, and he was a plebe. So he did his Beast Barracks summer, his first summer there, and he was sending letters home. And he was 3 years ahead of me at school, and I was reading the letters, and he had a lot of crazy adventure stories and how hard it was, and sort of stories about this guy or that guy quitting and sort of not making it. So I got kind of pulled back into that, being very interested in the academies. And so, yeah.
That's fascinating. I ask only because we did a questionnaire at a recent conference. Can you name the 5 official service academies of the United States?
West Point.
Yep.
The Boat School in Annapolis.
Yep.
Air Force Academy. The U.S. Coast Guard Academy and the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy.
I
Kings
didn't
Point.
know about the Merchant Marine Academy until a few days ago.
Great
That must be
institution.
an officer academy thing, because we were looking up for a quiz thing. I'm like, I knew of the Merchant Marines, like I know they're a thing. I just didn't realize that they were an official service academy, and one of the few that actually you can go you can actually go to, I think, every single branch afterwards, and it's like 1,000 students total. So did you think of the Merchant Marine Academy?
I did not know of the Merchant Marine Academy at the time, but a little bit later in life, I ended up coaching baseball and getting really into helping high school age guys prepare for the recruiting, process. And one of my players, a great young man, he ended up at Kings Point at the Merchant Marine Academy, and now he's a fighter pilot in the Air National Guard. So there you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's an opportunity there.
Yeah.
Shout out Merchant Marine Academy if
Exactly.
you haven't thought of it. I guess look
Kings
into
Point,
it.
baby.
Yeah. Well, let's see what we've got in the MRE. So I've got obviously the amazing, tasty pork maple patty.
Have you ever gone heater on the show, or
We have a few times.
That's
So
crazy.
the question to you is, do you want to go heater or no
we'll
heater?
see. I don't know. Raviolis are always good cold.
It's not a bad MRE to go unheated. Let's see.
Italian breadsticks.
Those are pretty good.
go.
I like those.
We'll get the M&Ms.
What is this? Bacon, peppers, onions. Oh, hash browns, I think.
Hash browns. A little fruit punch. Electrolyte.
Granola.
All right, peanut butter or cheese? What do you think? Cheese spread.
I've never seen 0 calorie sweetener.
You have a Splenda
Is
for the coffee.
Are these knockoff MREs, or are they running out of regular sugar here? They're just becoming more health conscious on their
Recovery bar.
maple muffin toppings.
I feel like we sampled something like this last week at MVS.
Yep.
Some guy was handing out samples. Okay.
Oh, really? Wait, salted caramel marshmallow.
It's a little crispy. All right, and then we got the
smoked almonds.
Same
great flavor.
The gum.
These flavor packets I've always enjoyed. You're grabbing dinner with a friend here too, so
yes,
I mean, you can always save some.
I gotta tread lightly here.
Yeah.
We got the Tabasco still. See if it's. Yep, it's still glass, right?
Yep. Table syrup. Love this. Naturally and artificially. Okay. Awesome. Have I had this one before on the podcast? I don't remember, but
the gum, the legendary gum.
Mm-hmm.
Did we settle on whether this is what's the urban legend here, that it's a laxative or
the urban legend is that? But I've now have had the gum multiple times on the podcast and afterwards, and either I have issues and it's just a me thing. Doesn't work for me. So I think it is just an urban legend, unless I'm my stomach's unique.
Yeah, that's still a thing though. I remember we were convinced of that. So
yep, it's funny enough actually, and I won't call them out. Apparently, it was a common myth though that white tiger, I think it was called, in Iraq. So we had ripets in Afghanistan. I guess white tiger was a popular caffeine drink in Iraq, and people thought it was it had nicotine in it. And that was an urban legend that I guess everyone thought was true, but it was like Nicane or Nicene or something like that like most energy drinks had, and one person misread
some herbal stimulant.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, it's nicotine, not Nicene, and then it went on to be popularized.
It reminds me of like the Kodiak urban legends. With the fiberglass.
Yeah. I might go heated purely because
you're gonna go heated?
Brown sounds pretty good. Like it would be a good heated thing, but no need. Or are you gonna go heated? I guess.
Let's see. The heater's the same.
Heaters are the same.
Got a little bit of a protective barrier on them.
Yeah.
Let's heat it up.
All right. I mean,
get some water here.
Might as well. I've got nothing to prove. Of course, they're still difficult.
There are some good instructions. Hasn't really changed at all, though.
No, the only thing is that they've now separated the cardboard with the
that's right,
with the stuff. But okay, so you were dead set on Air Force for the longest time.
I was.
Suddenly, West Point becomes an option. Is it that they're a better baseball team, or because there are fixed wing aircraft in the Army? We had Brett on. He was a fixed wing aircraft.
Yeah.
But not too many. So what changed? If you need
my eyesight wasn't great, even coming up through high school. I sort of felt like, I think at that time you had to have pretty much perfect vision, or 20/20 vision. But I think it was. I got to visit my friend Scott up there. We went for a football game, and we got to meet the cadets, and I just fell in love with the place, the history of it, the cadets were. I was expecting them to be intimidating.
Yeah,
they were really down to earth. They came from all walks of life, something I had not encountered at that point. Yeah. So I just fell in love with the place, the mission, and some of the other things you can do in the military. You can fly helicopters. You can. Join the armor, you can be in the infantry, and that was my branch. I ended up going infantry.
Yeah.
So, it's just a special place, and they didn't really pursue me for baseball, so that was a little frustrating. And I was like sending in local newspaper clips at the time, and never heard back from the program. I was invited to visit Princeton and a few other schools, and I ended up verbally committing to go play baseball at Princeton.
Okay.
And so I was sort of almost on that track too. They have an ROTC program. So I could have still gone the military route there. And then I think the Army coaching staff got wind of my sort of being committed to go to Princeton, and they realized I was the young man who'd been writing them. And so they had kept the file on me too. So then some things changed, and I was happy to get that call. And, so that's the long and short of it.
So you got into the West Point baseball team.
I did. Yeah. I was applying kind of academically anyway.
Yeah.
And then the program, the baseball program, got wind of this, and that kicked everything into overdrive a little bit. So
having most of your family members being on the enlisted side, were they ashamed that you traded in, were a traitor to them? And,
no,
I'm kidding, but
they
I mean,
weren't. Yeah, but there was a lot of smack. There was a lot of smack talking. So
did you ever think about the enlisted route, or like you knew college was going to be kind of your thing after high school? And it seemed like, I mean, academically to get into Princeton and all that, like you were doing well in high school.
I did okay. I mean, I felt there were a lot better. I was probably like, I think like top 10% of my high school class.
Yeah.
I wasn't by any means the valedictorian, but as you know, for better or for worse, if you're getting recruited to play a sport, that kind of gives you a little bit of a boost. So I didn't think about enlisting, although it's funny especially when I was a platoon leader, my favorite part about being a junior officer, was my enlisted guys in the platoon and the NCOs. So it was good that I had my brother and my dad to kind of they offered that perspective on the enlisted side.
Right.
Junior non-commissioned officer. And so it was good to have their perspective.
So you weren't just the clueless butter bar. You had some people you could lean on
I was probably clueless enough, but I had incredible. I think I served in 2 platoons. I served at Fort Bragg. I was in the 82nd Airborne Division, 1st Brigade, 2nd Battalion, so White Devils. I had a light infantry platoon, so the first platoon was the light infantry. Then I was in a anti-tank platoon. Okay. 2 great platoon sergeants, Brian Severino, Derek Kinlaw, and those guys raise you as a new platoon leader. So I was blessed. I had 2 really good ones.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I guess before we get into your West Point experience, did the Air Force try to do any Hail Marys at the very end when they caught a wind that you were going to West Point, or once that happened?
I don't know what year I stopped writing them letters. I had a pretty good little streak going, and then it was probably 4 or 5 years. I was kind of
just
They wrote back, so I felt pretty stoked about that. And
what was your experience like in West Point? I often ask this question, right, of your perceived understanding of what it might be, and then the reality once you get there. Like, how was your experience, especially during plebe week? Like your first year, you're a plebe or pledge. I forget what the proper nomenclature
is. You're a plebe, yep. You're a plebe, and then you're something that's called a yuck as a sophomore, and a cow, and then a firstie. We didn't have, it was a little pre-internet at that time. Still, the internet was just kind of with us. So I read books about it. There were a lot of good books, and I felt like the experience even. Oh yeah, we got here.
These are always really good.
I like the pineapple. It looks
maple.
Oh,
whatever.
It smells good.
Yeah,
hey, solid. So it was pretty well documented still at the time. So I kind of felt like I knew what I was getting into, and it was pretty consistent. You're always focused on what the first year is like, because that's what people deem the highest attrition year, but it, really a lot of the challenges that you face and you go through, they come sometimes after that plebe year.
Really?
So, it was pretty much what I expected it to be.
And academically, did you feel like it was a big jump between high school and college, or?
I realized I went to pretty good schools. Yeah. Massachusetts public schools are very good, I think, compared to the nation. So I kind of felt like I went to Bridgewater Rainham, shout out to BR, great high school at the time. So I was prepared, but the academics I felt like, they're kind of known to get even really more rigorous the second year. Okay. First year, you get through the routine of being a cadet. Academics are challenging, but really, I think the challenge kicked in sophomore year.
In West Point, they only offer STEM degrees too. So you would have to pick, it's always a BS, I think, right? Like, I mean, even if it's econ, it's a BS in economics. If it's, whatever, it all is always a math lens to it. Did you find yourself like pretty adapt to dealing with that level of like STEM degree, or did you find yourself more on the like liberal arts side?
I was a little more liberal artsy. I majored in international relations, which I really love the kind of core curriculum around that side. So I did that. Yeah, you do have to have an engineering track, which is almost like a minor. But I did systems engineering, which is more like an operations type track. So, but yeah, I mean, I felt like I was more of a math type going in, but it was good. It was a fun major. And so, yeah.
And when did it shift from you wanting to be, you know, a pilot to infantry? Because those are radically different fields.
Yeah.
And I can imagine there has to be some sort of impetus to that you started transitioning from I want to be in the air to being on the ground.
Yeah. So the Army, and especially at the military academy, the infantry, you know, maybe an outside perspective would think that that's kind of where it's hard. It's physically demanding. Yeah. You don't really have, nowadays there's fancy equipment everywhere, but it's not deemed as sort of as Hollywood, I guess, as some of the other functional areas. So, but you learn, because it's a leadership and it's a people-driven institution, that the infantry is really held up as important as any branch or anything you can do. So there's a lot of emphasis, ability to learn, interact with infantry officers, leaders in the Army that came that route. So it was something that as you go through your summer training, it's the core emphasis on everything you do. Right. So liked it. A lot of my classmates that I felt I respected, you know, it's a popular branch selection. Yeah. So, but you get a chance to try it out. That's the beauty of it, summer training. And I liked it. It was challenging. Wasn't quite sure, you know, down that path is a Ranger school, some really challenging milestones. And it's kind of like a redux of going to West Point. You hear about it. You wonder if you can do it. Yeah. You wonder if you can hack it. And so you get drawn to that.
And you're like, I don't need no comfy seat in that airplane. Like, I want to be boots on the ground. And then you go 82nd Airborne. So I guess you're like, I'll jump out of the plane, but I don't want to fly.
They wouldn't. Right. I always say, you know, they wouldn't let me touch any of the controls, but they're happy to have me aboard. And so it ended up. And when you're there, you have a lot of the commanders of different units come and, you know, they'll present to you in certain instructional hours about what life is like in our unit. And one of the brigade commanders came from Fort Bragg from the 82nd, and he put on this, you know, he was just all fired up, and he had this high speed video at the time that basically showed what life as a paratrooper was like. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of us were really fired up to go infantry, to go airborne at Bragg. So
how was the rest of your time in West Point? So it sounded like the summer of your second year, or going from your first to the second, you do the, I forgot what you called it, the exposure.
The second summer, it is Camp Buckner. Okay. So it's kind of the first summer is basic training. You're getting to learn everything. It's foundational, in terms of military life. And then the second year, you're getting exposed to different branches. You're out at this Camp Buckner is on a lake. Yep. And you're basically bunked there all summer, and you're in the field quite a bit. It's fun. They expose you to all the branches, and you have field problems. You do patrols. You have there's cool obstacle courses there. There's something called the Slide for Life, where it's kind of fun Army lake stuff. I would put it that.
Like an adult version of summer camp.
It's adult summer camp for sure. So so that's year 2, and that gives you the opportunity to start to hone in on what you may want to do in the Army. And I had a great experience there. What did we got here?
Smoked almond, really good actually.
I'm a big almond guy.
Right. It tastes just like Planters or whatever the big name brand is. Not a sponsor.
I would have appreciated some almonds in my MREs back in the day.
I always had the cargo pocket of sunflower seeds was my my go-to.
Are you like plain Jane, David? Are you like ranch, barbecue?
I do David's barbecue was like my go-to.
Yeah.
Ranch was decent. Dill pickle was good, but sometimes it would be like so much of that like vinegar that you'd like
I like
lose
the
feeling.
dill. Yeah. I don't like how the flavored seeds get in your hand. Like I don't like the residual salt I can handle.
Yeah.
It's like not quite Cheetos, but something about like, the barbecue. It's like, I
always try to do where it's like you cut just enough where you can kind of just like pour it into your mouth.
Yeah.
David's, if you want to sponsor a video, happy to do so.
I think they're owned by Big Seed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. They're Big Seed now.
They don't need us. Were there other parts of the Army that you were thinking of? Because I know that at least in West Point, you get your selection, but then there's a chance that you might not get it. And that infantry is a like well sought after branch.
Yeah, out of West Point, it's little known, but you can branch transfer. So you can go into the Marine Corps.
Okay.
You can go to the Air Force. We have a classmate that is an Air Force fighter pilot. So I did look into the branch transfer to the Marine Corps. We had one of our TAC officers was a Marine Corps officer. But infantry, I kind of felt was Army infantry was my top choice.
Yeah.
So
How did you get Ranger and Airborne then in your contract, or how did you get selected for it?
Yeah, it's a little different than when you have an enlistment contract. You really have to have that stuff lined up, or hope it is.
Yeah.
And
if the recruiter tells you otherwise, they're lying to you.
Right.
You cannot just add it.
Yeah, and I've heard all the stories. When you branch into the infantry as an Army officer, it's expected that you attend Ranger school. It's almost like finishing school after platoon leader course, which we called IOBC, Infantry Officer Basic. So you're expected to go to Ranger school. There's a lot of great officers that did not earn their Ranger tab for whatever reason. You can it's easy to get injured. I was injured, during Ranger school too. So, but for the most part, they want you to come out of Ranger school with the Ranger tab, ready to take your platoon.
Yeah.
So, same with Airborne and all that stuff. Yeah.
I had a buddy of mine who went to selection and whatever, like the last 2 or 3 weeks, like fell off an obstacle or something, like snapped his leg. And
Yeah.
like, all right,
I
go
did
back to your
selection as
unit.
well. And that obstacle, the nasty nick, very much like the Ranger school obstacle course, which is the Derby Queen.
Yeah.
So yeah, it can happen to anybody.
Yeah. And it's like no amount of preparation and training. Like that's just bad luck more than anything else. When did you know? And then I guess so it sounds like the last 3 or 4, the year 3 and 4 were like, I know I'm going this route. I know after that I'm doing this. Like it sounded like relatively smooth time at West Point.
Yeah, it was. I think I played baseball through college, so I think that was an outlet. I also feel that where you are in life, I think it's marked by the friends that you make and that core group of people, whether it's high school, college, your military unit, or whatever. So it was a great 4 years. I think having a team and playing for traveling and kind of having an outlet was definitely helpful. It's not that it got you out of duties or certain everyday cadet things. It did to some extent, but it was, that part usually feels like work to people playing a sport in college, and it was an outlet to us. So made a lot of great friends, and it was, Yeah,
because I mean, I know that in West Point you have to play a sport. It doesn't have to be a varsity sport, but you have to play something. So I can assume that those who maybe aren't so much into the sports side and then feeling like they have to do it, it's like, all right, here's the thing that I need to do as like an obligation, where if like you've played sports your entire life, it's like, I love doing this. Yeah, you got to play. You have to be, they say every cadet an athlete. So each season there's tackle football, there's rugby, there's a sport called flicker ball, which is like a mashup of rugby, area hockey, which is street hockey, boxing is very, very popular. So everybody plays something, and everybody's, at least 2 out of the, I'd say each semester, pretty much everybody's doing something for their company. How was the transition into then active duty active duty Army.
Yeah.
And out of curiosity, did you at any point thinking like, maybe I can go pro with this baseball thing? Or was it a thing that you said like, I knew I'm going to play this through college, and then like that's the extent of it?
Yeah, I think at the time, I had a scout from the Cincinnati Reds tell me when I was in high school that you should be happy to go play in college, and then your frame, your makeup is not, you're not getting drafted, right? And so I didn't have illusions that, and then there were rules were pretty rigorous and specific back then. You really, if you got drafted, my best friend on the team, who actually he's still at West Point, he heads up the math department there.
Wow.
He was drafted by the White Sox. He was one of our all-time greatest players, and he was ineligible to join the White Sox. So we basically sent them the equivalent of a thank you note. Said, thank you for drafting me. I have to fulfill my military commitment. But he was good enough to play, to keep playing. But no.
Was he able to play after the Army? Because there's a couple people out there. I'm not going to be able to say their names. I don't know if we can research that. But there's a few that I played, done well, did their service, got out, and then actually were able to join back in.
Nowadays, if you are drafted to any of the professional leagues, the Army, now the rule has gone back and forth, it changes, but we had a couple that were in the Super Bowl too this year on the football side. But there are Army baseball player alums that are in the minor leagues, and one or two have made it to the majors. So the rules have changed.
Got it.
So
transitioning in, graduate West Point, then straight to, I'm assuming, Airborne School, then Ranger, then 82nd.
Yeah, pretty much that's the sequence. You go down, when you get assigned your branch, the first thing you do is everyone in that branch goes to the home of that branch. So in the infantry, that's Fort Benning. So Fort Benning is where you get your infantry officer basic training, and they have airborne schools down there as well.
Yeah.
So I went IOBC, IOBC, that's what it is. I was thinking of the
I forget all the acronyms.
I was thinking the IOCT at West Point. So it was infantry officer basic, and then it was airborne, and then a little pre-ranger school to like get you ready, and then and then ranger school starts at Benning too. Wow. It doesn't complete itself at Benning, but that's the first phase of ranger school is down at Benning. So
you're down north. Oh, I always forget. North
Georgia.
Georgia.
Yeah. Columbus, Georgia.
During the summertime, I bet too.
We were there.
Or I guess summer through winter.
I was there basically through the winter, spring, fall, winter, spring. So you're there about 9 months, and it takes a while for you to get. Infantry because of Ranger School, you have a little longer progression to finally get to your ultimate duty station to get a hold of your platoon. Yeah. So
when did you know you were going to get sent to the 82nd? Because I mean, with Airborne, you have well, at least on the enlisted side, it's like you're going to 82nd, you're going to 173rd, and then I'm going to forget the unit names, but Hawaii and Alaska, I think, are like your options.
Yep. There's Vicenza, Italy too, for an airborne battalion. So you early in the school year, your senior year, the first semester, you select your branch. Branch is based on your ranking in the class. So if you're the top guy or gal in the class, you have your choice of anything. If you're the higher up you are, you get your pick. So I got infantry, which if most people get that if they want, even though it's a top selection, there are a lot of infantry slots. Then you progress through your first year, your senior year. Then about this time, early winter, you do post night. Okay. So then you put within your branch, you put requests in for where you want to go. So for us, that's Bragg, Campbell, Fort Hood, which is mechanized infantry, Fort Lewis, again, Vicenza, Italy. There's usually one plum spot there for that airborne battalion. So then within your branch, you have an academic ranking, and you go. It's just chalk.
So 100% of them are applying for Vicenza. One of them are getting
not everybody, because people are pretty realistic. There's Korea. There's some pretty, the Army. It's the Army station. So Fort Bragg goes out relatively for the major installations. It goes out in a pretty quick fashion. So I probably barely was in that group, but I picked Bragg. That was
Really?
that was the choice. Yeah.
Not a Fort Drum and be up near in the Northeast, or were you trying to get away from home?
Yeah, no, I think Drum was probably a third or fourth because the 10th Mountain is a great unit. I was really, really interested on, it was the 82nd, the 101st. There's a lot of great duty stations, but I think the 10th Mountain, because we did some training with them as cadets. So that they were really squared away. So, yeah.
I after the 173rd, I looked at 10th Mountain just because I wanted to be kind of back in the Northeast and did not get it. I think I did like Fort Drum. I had like Hawaii on there and somewhere else, and then like not even anything on my thing. They're like 101st. I'm like, all right, I guess. Needs of the Army. It was fine. So yeah, let's jump into your time at Bragg. So you've basically 5 years worth of 4 years at West Point training there. Then all the infantry stuff, Airborne, Ranger. That's a long preparation time to finally, quote unquote, being the real deal. How is that transition?
A lot of schoolhouse.
A lot of schoolhouse.
A lot of schoolhouse. I think a lot of us, and I had a great class. I have a great class, West Point class in '98, which goes a little ways back. And some of my classmates, they're still in. A lot of them are through retirement, but I really had a good class that went infantry. So I think a lot of us were of the mindset that we were chomping at the bit to get to our platoons. And, that's why I think you hear stories of young lieutenants, they get their platoons and they're just like, they're in sprint mode. And, they've had guys in that, platoon that have been there for years and years. And every 12 months, they've got someone coming in just revved.
Yeah.
And so we were revved to go, to get to where we're headed for sure. So,
and then how did it go for you? I mean, suddenly now being with your, as a PL, you'll have probably the closest relationship with either the platoon sergeant who's a sergeant first class, maybe the, company, first sergeant, but really like day in and day out with that platoon sergeant.
Yeah. He's they're your partners, they're your mentors, they're everything to you. And I had heard Brian Severino, you sort of hear you're getting a great platoon sergeant, or you get a little bit of the word on the street before you sort of take your platoon. And I'd heard he was an RI, a Ranger instructor. So I heard prior to our unit, he had been back at Ranger school, and the Ranger instructors are known as pretty scary dudes, right? Yeah. So I had a picture of him as a pretty stern, all business type guy, and but it turned out, just they're so meaningful in your development and your sort of the whole ethos of you can respect someone's rank, right?
Yeah.
But not the individual. It's true. So I felt like he gave me an immediate dose of self-awareness that I needed, maybe to sort of take. It's 38 members of the platoon, and like I said, they come from all walks of life, demographically, geographically. So Brian, and then my next platoon leader, because I had two platoons, Derek Kinlaw, and they were totally different personality types, different backgrounds. They're just so meaningful in your developmental process. Yeah.
I hate to age you, but what year is this now?
It's 1999.
Okay, so 99. The Rangers, well, some of the Rangers were in Somalia, but I guess the most part, like relatively like peacetime army.
Yeah.
Not to say
Ranger
that
regiment, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not to say that there's a difference. But there's maybe a mentality difference between wartime army and kind of peacetime army. Like,
right.
Having served kind of throughout that shift, like what was day-to-day life like for you guys, there? Like, I mean, I remember even, I mean, when I was in during technical, wartime, we would still be doing training rotations in Germany where it's the, notional Russians or notional
Krasnovians,
some sort of Eastern European country that like definitely isn't the Russians.
The Ivans and the
exactly.
The fictional, all the fictional countries that were like Soviet bloc sounding names. And
exactly.
Yeah, it was
like, I wonder who we're talking about here. But because coin operation isn't a thing at that point in time.
It was academic and sort of limited to sort of thought leaders, I guess you would call them out there for sure. Yep.
So I mean, what was life like then, and I guess leading up to 2001? Like, did you see a shift when that happened?
So a lot of us chose the 82nd because they had a famously high op tempo. So, you have 3 brigades there. Generally speaking, there's not, at the time there were 9 battalions, 3 brigades. So there's 1 battalion always at the highest state of readiness.
Right.
Their equipment's rigged up, ready to deploy anywhere within a couple hours. And then, you have a cycle of readiness, training, and then maintenance. And you're kind of rolling through that calendar continuously. So that was still a peacetime high op tempo. High op tempo was different. The post 9/11 op tempo for the 82nd was a lot of deployments, a lot of back-to-back deployments. I was there on September 11th, and we were the DRF 1, so we were the Division Ready Force 1.
Yeah.
At the time, I was the Airborne Operations Officer in my battalion, the S3 Air. And you may recall this, you may not. Every day we were getting an update. We may go here. The Sudan was mentioned. There were all sorts of destinations. They were figuring things out. It took about a month till what was Columbus Day weekend. And Marines, out of the conventional forces, Marines had heloed into Kandahar. They seized the airfield.
Right.
We had rotated off our DRF-1 position at that point. So, but that kicked things off. I extended my time at Bragg another 6 months. I did go off to SFAS, did a selection. But then when you become a captain now as a captain, the captains now have to go back to school. They have to go back to Benning and
Captain's Career Course?
Captain's Career Course, Infantry Captain's Career Course.
Yeah.
So I was, after about 3 years at Bragg, I was back at Benning in Columbus.
You just love love Georgia, and
it wasn't that bad. Benning and Columbus were, I think people come to a lot of military installations with very low expectations, and some justifiably so.
Yeah.
I didn't really have complaints.
That's good.
So yeah.
How was selection?
Yeah, selection was shorter than Ranger School. In total, the meat of it is about 3 weeks. It's about 4 weeks total with kind of everything that goes into it.
Yeah.
Very much, very heavy emphasis in Ranger School. What stands out is the graded patrols, the sleep deprivation, the food deprivation, and kind of the different phases that you got to go through from, there's Ranger, there's Benning phase, there's mountain phase, there's jungle phase. At SFAS, it's all at Camp McCall, which is outside of Fort Bragg. And really there's an emphasis on land navigation and carrying heavy loads, doing so, just very long duration land nav courses. So they're different animals for sure.
And I guess maybe I hope not to hit on a nerve or something. So I guess what happens in selection? Were you able to pass, or was it an injury, or
Nope. Went through selection, which is, some people don't realize that's not the full extent of qualifying. And they say special forces, people use that broadly, but it's really the Green Berets of the Army. It's not broadly, it's special operations. So to get your Green Beret, you go through something that's called the qualification course, the Q course, which is there's 3 more phases plus languages. There's other aspects to that. Selection just kind of gets you in the door to go to the Q course. Doesn't earn you anything.
So did you go just for the selection, or were you trying to get into the Q course?
My plan was to attend the Q course and stay in the military, and obviously go to the special forces side. I was bouncing ideas and sort of my plans off of a few people that were my mentors. And I said, look, I really like this, but I want to do like 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm not a career guy. I'm not going to be anointed anyone's division commander.
Right.
I think that was kind of my sense. Although I felt like I had always great relationships with my superior officers, and I didn't have an issue with OERs, which were the evals. I was doing fine. I just didn't think I wanted to do the whole 2025. I kind of wanted to go back home eventually. So. Yeah.
How many years were you in already by the time you went to selection?
I was in for 3.5 years at that point.
Okay. Yeah.
Coming up my 4th year. So someone whose guidance I really value, a couple people said, look, either get out soon and get a skill that is something other than being infantry, go get your MBA, or make a career out of this. But I think if you're trying to do the 10, 12 years, it's not impossible, but you're going to be kind of caught in the no man's land of career transitions.
Yeah.
So that was a driver for me. I reflected and I decided, to take my GMAT and to think about B school at that time. So
I've talked to a few people about that, of like, not that there's a point of no return. Oh, what are you looking for?
My spoon.
Oh, the spoon. Did I? Oh, I hope I didn't steal your spoon.
Do I need a spoon?
Let's see here.
I'm sure it's here somewhere.
There's this one open container. So that's the other spoon container. Did they just...
Oh, I see it.
Oh, there we go.
Forgive me.
So this is my second time having this one. Much better heated up compared to cold.
Yeah. What do you have again?
This is the maple sausage.
That's... So you maple cake and maple
a lot of basically just
it's a Vermont syrup. National Guard favorite right there.
Exactly. This one's pretty darn good heated up, and if you mix the sausage with
here goes.
the potato hash, better or worse than Chef Boyardee?
Oh, it's better.
Really?
It hits the same. It hasn't changed. Wow.
There we go. 1 out of 10.
That's wild. No, it's, this is like, this is like a first grab. The box opens up and you have the old first dibs.
Yeah.
You know what that's called. No, I go right for this tortellini. So that's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Been a while.
It's they're not bad at all. I'm actually shocked at how well they were able to make the maple sausage, because that was a notoriously, like, if you got maple sausage, at least I remember being kind of pissed about it, but they've improved the recipe significantly.
When did you get the idea to do MREs on this podcast?
Before we even started, I was like, if we're going to do a podcast and we're talking to people, I want something that we can do kind of together. And I'm a big fan of food. And then there's obviously like hot ones and a few others out there where it's like food related or drink related or what have you. I'm like, well, what is something that everyone has done in the military? Like, everyone's had an MRE.
Yes.
And like the name of the podcast, In the Field, whether it's basic AIT, whatever, in the military, deployed, like, everyone's had an MRE in the field, sitting down, shooting the shit, trading. So I thought that was like a good kind of bonding thing, especially for veterans who maybe haven't had.
Did you get cheese or peanut butter, by the way? Where'd you get that honey stuff?
I just got honey.
You didn't get peanut butter or
maple
cheese?
syrup. I just got straight up.
Man,
I'm telling you, this is.
They loaded you up with maple.
Exactly, just pure sugar in this. I'm actually curious of how much sugar's in this one alone. Oh, only 1 gram of sugar. So I guess it's. I don't know. They're figuring out a way to do this without sugar.
Our thing was, who's got peanut butter wants cheese. Always trying to get the peanut butter.
Were you peanut butter? Were you
peanut butter? I was team peanut butter all the way.
Yeah.
Ranger pudding. The crackers.
Yep. Gus episode. I don't know if you saw that one. He made it.
Yes, he did. I saw that. Did he do the creamer, though? Did he go full tilt?
I don't think we had creamer. I think that we couldn't find it in our packet, so we had to go no creamer. What was your favorite? Was Ranger pudding your go-to snack, or?
Just out of boredom. Yeah. So that's what, I remember that one. I'm trying to remember some of the weird stuff back, the weird charms, the candies. some of the stuff. We didn't have pizza. It was chili mac. It was kind of all very, very standard, but
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of some of the weird stuff we had back then.
I think there was an omelet or like egg
Yes,
based.
the omelet. That was the worst. That was terrible. We had the pound cakes. Yeah, the omelets were gross. That was a bad one.
I don't know if they maybe were around. I'm just not vividly remembering that when I was in. Were charms considered bad luck in the Army?
I don't recall that, but
Okay.
I didn't like them. I'd try to foist those. I didn't like those at all. So
I just watched, I just rewatched Generation Kill, which I'm not a big war movie guy or war show guy, but it's one of the few shows that I think get the talk and the boredom. And then
I haven't seen it.
It's really, I would recommend it. Actually, I want to get him on the show. Maybe this is a shout out. Somebody can pass this along to him. Rudy Reyes, who served in the Recon Battalion, was also playing himself on the show. So it's on HBO. And he plays himself, and I think one other person plays himself, both in the show, and he also was there.
They tag him.
Yeah, and so it was Evan Wright of the Rolling Stones wrote all these articles of the invasion of Iraq,
right. Yep.
and then that. I'm gonna forget his name.
Read the articles.
The platoon leader there wrote a book as well, so it was like a mix of those two things turned into the show. But to your point of the 10 or 12 years and then getting out, that was like a kind of a common theme on the show as well. Of not that it's a point of no return, but it does become, I think, a little bit more difficult if you're like, well, I'm already halfway there to retirement. Like, do I just kind of go? So you were in your 3-year. You had a 4-year contract, 6-year contract.
It was 5.
5.
When we entered, they had upped it to 6, our commitment to go to West Point. And then for some reason, I think a year or two in, they took it back to 5. I don't know why. Maybe post-Gulf War.
Good for you.
Kind of, they were kind of after the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, they had a drawdown, I think. So who knew? But
what is then the kind of last year of your time in the military looking like?
Yep. So I went back and taught platoon leaders. So I taught at the IOBC. So I was a captain now, and we had new lieutenants coming in. So I did a few of those classes and just got them ready for Ranger School, got them ready to be platoon leaders. Nothing exciting, but you end up, that's called TRADOC. That's the Army's kind of trading arm of all the branches. So you end up training people at some point. And so, that's what I did until I kind of dropped some applications to B school, took the GMATs, and I was still trying to figure out if that was what I was going to do.
Yeah.
I think the more kind of I was in limbo, unsure, I sort of felt like I need to make a change here, or I need to really start to map out what I think is my 25-year plan in the Army. So
how good were you? I don't mean this might sound offensive. How good were you at the GMAT? I mean, being out of school for so long, was it a struggle bus? Like, did you have to study a whole bunch? Like, what resources were you using to kind of figure that out?
I don't know how people study for like the GMAT nowadays, but I went to Barnes & Noble and I got this book called GMAT 800. It was a GMAT prep paper book. And anytime I had a coffee break or a lunch break, I'd just open it up and just rip through pages. And so there we go. I don't know if that's even a way you prepare for exams these days, but that's how I prefer prepare, So,
I bought an ACT or SAT for like dummies book. Yeah. Call back to, I think, actually Gus's episode again. He talked about a guy slinging encyclopedias out of the PX. So I guess you didn't get trapped by the encyclopedia.
No encyclopedias,
but actual real study books. Yeah.
So that's what I did. I just went through workbooks and I showed up and took it. And I really, I had a short list of schools that I applied to. And just did interviews and kind of, but it was funny because I went to B school having an idea what I thought I wanted to do when I came out. But in retrospect, I realized that it was sort of I was kind of gravitating toward a typical path of what I thought that was. And so, I got to B school. I went up to Dartmouth at Tuck, And that was really what opened my eyes up to kind of what's out there from a career path standpoint. So
Dartmouth, not an easy school to get into. I mean, so you did well on your GMAT, must have had good grades in your from West Point. Were there other schools that you were looking into or?
Yep. HBS, Harvard Business School, got dinged by them. Sloan, MIT, and Yale School of Management. So
no love for the Massachusetts native.
I was, yeah, what's a tough one? We had a lot of class of 98 classmates that went to HBS, and I think a lot of them were smarter than me. So I wasn't disgruntled at all. But great institution. It's funny. I work now in Harvard Square, so it's cool to be on campus there. Sloan, got admitted to Sloan, and then Yale School of Management. So I had to kind of sort through all that. So,
and then were there any like factors for picking Dartmouth over the others?
Yeah. So I canvassed as many people that had taken that path, and I'd asked them, hey, what are your top 5 schools? And a lot of times people, the number one is their alma mater default. So if they went to Georgetown or wherever, they'd say, look, well, after my school, Tuck came up like as a real strong, the next one. Yeah. Small class size, my graduating class at Tuck was 240 people. Everybody knew each other. Military friendly, very supportive of veterans. They also, as opposed to Sloan, where I felt you have to really pick your curriculum, which I didn't feel like I was equipped enough to sort of chart my own MBA, especially with the cost of things. So Tuck was good about laying out a core curriculum that was pretty strong, and you could sort of, after that, decide what path you wanted to take. Right. So I felt like it was a general management curriculum, and that set me up as opposed to putting the onus on me. I just didn't feel like I was ready.
And then how was your time at Dartmouth, especially, I mean, how much time was it from when you left the military to starting your MBA courses?
Yeah, it was about 9 months.
Okay.
So when I got out of active duty, I joined a Special Forces National Guard unit in Massachusetts. So I was still hoping to go to the Q course at that time. I was also getting married and starting school, landing an internship. A lot of things happening. So it didn't really work out that I was able to carve out 9 to 12 months to finish that, which was a little unfortunate. But I got out and I had plans to go to the Q course and then come back and start school. My assignment was lost in what's called the ATARs. Do they still have ATARs where they schedule you for training?
I want to say yes, but I don't remember off the top of my head. I
found myself with about 8 months of nothing to do. I was out and I was just off active duty. Wasn't going to start business school until late August. So I reached out to a friend of mine, a West Point connection. His name's Chris Young. And he's like, look, we could use you to come in here. It was a big known bank, regional bank at the time, Citizens Bank. And we just need someone in our operations group. We need a couple like project manager type people. I said, look, I don't know the first thing about banks or operations or technology. He's like, doesn't matter. Come in, just help us kind of. I don't know that I really did I don't know if I made a meaningful contribution to the bank at that time. Whatever they gave me, I tried to, put my best foot forward, and I was like learning what a civilian company was, which was even kind of more interesting. But that's where I was. And, I think one of the takeaways there is he knew that he had the ability to throw the rope over the wall for me and give me some consulting work. He eventually he engaged me about maybe just staying on and maybe not even doing the B-School thing. But I was pretty set in what I wanted to do. But yeah, so he, I think when you get out, you feel a little bit of drift. It can be a little scary. You walk into certain situations, you feel like you don't know the handshake. When you're in the Army and all of our branches, you exist to help one another. So you feel like you feel like approachable and that you can approach people. Yeah. So the civilian world's a little bit different. You have to kind of figure out some things. So anybody who's there to kind of take your call, to help you out, it's something that you want to pay forward. So that was Dave. Dave was, yeah.
It's, maybe I haven't talked about this, but there's like this, not call of the void, but there's in the military, it is like, okay, I know I'm going to go training here. I know kind of, even though something might pop up and you might get orders, you kind of become aware of what's happening in the military. I also think that that's the point of basic training and job training and selection and all these other things are to prepare you for those things. And then when you go out into the civilian world and they're like, I mean, it is just like one big open void out there. And if it's like, you don't it, like you could quit, like you could quit tomorrow if you really want to. You could go to Dartmouth, you could move out west if you really wanted to. And obviously there's a lot of great things about that level of freedom. But I think when you spend X amount of years not in that system and then suddenly you're thrust into it, you're like, at least for me, there was a reckoning of that feeling.
It's a lack of structure. You wake up, there could be nothing on your calendar that day. And that can be scary to some people. So
there's so many things I want to talk about, and next time I'll come up to Boston and we'll find we got space,
absolutely,
to really dive into some of this stuff because I'm fascinated. A few things I want to hit on is your overall time at Dartmouth. Then I want to hit a little bit about your time at Leman Brothers, which was all the way up till 2008. If you're okay,
good. No, it's
high level
seminal moment of my journey.
Exactly, and then I guess recovering from 2008 and then how you landed to kind of where you're at today and maybe some of those like high level learnings.
So it's funny. I was saying earlier that in these stations in life, most of us, if we're fortunate enough, will come away with a few meaningful relationships and friends, and that kind of marks your time there in that chapter. And so I'd say Tuck is it's known to be a tight-knit community, very supportive, fun, bright, kind of humble people. And it was all that for me. I still have very close, deep relationships with my friends there. That was a transition time for me. So I think my first, the beginning weeks and months, you join up with the Tuck Veterans Club, and it's like 12 military people, and you're kind of feeling out the types of questions you can ask safely and all that. So your first kind of concentric circle within the B school, a civilian space, is other military, ex-military. And then from there you have a home base, and then you start to branch out and you meet your other friends. And so for me, it was a great place for 2 years to meet some incredible and interesting people that had no military background whatsoever. So,
I find it so important, and maybe I'll sound like a little bit of a broken record player here, but the most important thing of my time or experience of my time in Stanford was not really like the Veterans Club. As much as I loved hanging out with other veterans, it was like meeting civilians who had like incredible backgrounds and experiences. And like, I remember one in particular, like, I mean, just regular high school student. I'm 22 or 23 at the time. Like, I'd done my time in the military, but then he was like, I was like, what did you do as an internship in high school? Because I didn't do internships in high school. I worked at like Stop and Shop or whatever. He's like, I did like cancer research.
Some of these resumes are just crazy.
I'm like,
Stop and Shop.
I was like, I was by Massachusetts. There we go. Shout out Stop and Shop. Massachusetts establishment. But he's like, I did cancer research, a bio.
I know.
And I'm like,
it's crazy.
Okay, fine. You didn't serve in the military, but like, that's an insane resume to be here. And like the fact that you were able to like get there. It's just different paths.
It is.
And so I hate that we have to jump around here a little bit just for time's sake, but how do you get then into banking? And well, you talked about your first experience. How do you then get into Leman Brothers, and then how do you survive and get over 2008?
So the way it works, and it happens way more quickly than you think when you go to B school, like right away, you're just starting your classes and they have career panels. Recruiting starts. The summer internship process starts. And I just wasn't even ready to get my head around that. So I was going to career panels, and one was called Sector Smarts. and it was about all of the Wall Street type careers. And so they had a trader who was an alum, investment banking, institutional sales, asset management, and then they had wealth management. So I didn't know the difference between any of them. And so we had an alum, and she was at Goldman, and she started talking about what she did and how it was a generalist business owning career path. So as a generalist in the infantry, I was really responsible for, the deployment and the integration of lots of different things. Yeah. Wealth management's like that. The day of the market cycle could be dominated by fixed income, the stock market, alternative investments, private equity. It could be anything. So I like the idea of being a generalist, and I like the idea of building up my own business over time and having a say in that. And so I got pretty turned on to that relatively quickly. We still looked at a bunch of other options career-wise, but Lehman at the time, this was 2004. It's funny, it was also the time that the Red Sox, overtook the Yankees in the famous ALCS. Lehman sort of felt like they were the up and coming incumbent to be at some point. And so they had a very aggressive recruiting push on campus. A gentleman, Jack Peterson, a Tuck alum, who has now, he has founded a very successful investment firm since then. I responded well to their, I think, interest in not myself, but us as a group, us Tuck students. So that's the internship that I wanted, and that's where I landed in the following summer. Nice. So I landed at Lehman in their private wealth program. Their MBA associate program was a great class, and I joined up with a Boston-based team who is still my current partner, Bill Grinnell. So I've been with Bill for this whole time through the different stops that we've made. And part of that career path is supporting existing clients in that book of business and also building your own clientele. Yeah. So that was getting up and running. The environment wasn't that bad until 2007. A few hedge funds hit some really, they basically blew up on the credit side. And I think people knew that we were getting a little bit late innings in terms of the cycle. And then 2008 happened, and that was a tough time. It was Bear Stearns, and then it was Lehman. So as a team, we just had to figure out if we could make it through what could be a pretty tough outcome. And it ended up being, we ended up deciding to move to Credit Suisse at the time. We felt like it was a more conservatively run Swiss bank. Institutionally, it was sort of not in the headlines. And so we left about just before Lehman went under. So, yeah.
So you dodged it
a little bit. We when you resign, you have to sort of call on your clients after the fact and see if they want to join you. So I'd say it was concurrent. It happened all about the same time. So So
how do you get to now General Catalyst? And how do you define success?
Oh boy, great question. So I have an ex-First Republic colleague of mine. Well, he was in management at First Republic, and a couple of years ago, General Catalyst approached him and said, "Look, we want to bring in-house a wealth management operation, and really, it's in keeping with the company's founder-centric mission, really supporting founders." GC has been around since the year 2000, and it's a legendary franchise in venture capital. Their mission of just enhancing the flywheel of their founder ecosystem and their investors and adding value really resonated with me. So Dave Breslin, who runs GC Wealth, he reached out to me and asked me if we were interested in taking a different path and, working really, bringing our practice to a space that's really focused on founders and that ecosystem. And so that's how we ended up at GC. Forming GC Wealth. That was a year and a half ago. So we've been there about 17 months. Yeah.
Wow. And how do you define success for you?
You did ask me that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like professionally.
Success to me is the feeling that you have a long-term trajectory, that your goal is actually further out on the horizon, and that you feel that you're tacking toward that success. It's not a linear path. It's not something that's maybe necessarily happening at the moment, but it's that sense that you're on the right azimuth, and it's feeling like rewarded for having faith in a long-term process. So that's the financial advisor in me, kind of talking to people about, this is happening now, and it's important, and it's sometimes challenging, and the news is the news, and markets are markets. But if you can just pick your head up and kind of understand that you have an excellent chance of getting there, you should start to feel success now that you're trusting the process. So it's long term for me.
You kind of answered this. I mean, I guess like the follow up is like, do you feel like you've made it? Because I mean, you're, not to age you, you're probably 1 or 2 years ahead of me. Just a couple,
2-3 years. Yeah.
And I'm happy where I'm at. I feel professional fulfillment, but I'm like, well, maybe 10 years from now, then I'll feel like I've made it because then I've hit this goal. But do you feel like you've now gotten there, or does that goal just keep getting pushed further along the trajectory line?
Personally, I do. I feel that I've been married now for 20 years, just over 20 years. We were married when I was in business school. My wife, she knew me when I was a young infantry officer, so she's known me in every stage. So I feel that I have a 10 and a 12-year-old, two kids, and they're amazing kids. And I feel success is that I'm able to enjoy them and to enjoy my bond with them and enjoy my family. So that's probably my today's success, that I feel like, I've landed there, and I love that. I love my community. I live in a small seaside community, very involved in sort of the local, organizations and Little League baseball and some things. So I feel like I'm able to do that no matter what's going on in the markets but I think, professionally, there's the idea that I'm part of a larger vision, I think, for what GC Wealth can and ought to be. And that's pretty big, it's pretty substantial, even though I think we're off to a great start. So I think the excitement of knowing that endpoint is still out there, I'm okay with that, and knowing that we're headed there. So
Awesome. Well, Darin, I would love to keep talking. Unfortunately, we're at time. We'll have to have you back on again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.